What's shaking? My name's Cam and welcome back to another video. You may remember a little while ago I did a video called Goodreads Stalker Gets a Book Deal. I'll leave a card for that video because I feel like if you were to watch that video before you watch this one, it's going to make a whole lot more sense. There's just so much that happened and so many nuanced details that I discuss at length in that video that are kind of important to know for this video to make sense. But either way, I'll dot point it for you. The video was about a YA author named Kathleen Hale, and this is basically the dot points, okay? Dot point, Kathleen Hale writes a book. Dot point, Kathleen Hale gets a harsh book review. Dot point, Kathleen Hale uses her resources and connections to gather private information about this person. Dot point, Kathleen Hale harasses this person at their place of work by pretending to be someone else on the phone. And last dot point, Kathleen Hale physically rents a car, drives to this person's home, and leaves a passive-aggressive book on their doorstep. Oh, last dot point, writes a blog about it, making it seem fun and quirky. That's the entire situation, but like I said, if you want context, if you want the full story, of course you can go watch that video. Now, why am I making a part 2? Well, that's a good question. Thanks for asking, Cam. Yeah, no worries. Well, this situation is actually quite similar to when I did the videos on Lenny Sarum. You might remember as the author of the fantastic book series, Handbook for Mortals. I made a video describing an entire situation of how they scammed the bestseller lists, and then I made a follow-up video after Lenny Sarum was interviewed on a podcast. Well, it's a similar situation here. I'm making another follow-up video because Kathleen Hale has recently been interviewed, which is something that no one thought would happen because she kind of went into a social media dead zone after all of the controversy. But she's done an interview now with Buzzfeed. And I know what you're thinking. But why are you reading Buzzfeed? Buzzfeed is the shittest? And yeah, I probably wouldn't have even come across this article if not for an awesome follower of mine on Instagram who sent it to me in a DM. And originally I was like, I'll just have a read of it. I had absolutely no intention of responding to it or making any kind of video on it. But I read the entire article and I read the interview with Kathleen Hale, and there's a certain point that keeps being emphasized in this article that I think completely negates all of the criticism in a bad way. So I feel like I have to make a follow-up. I have to. Oh, and I forgot to add another dot point to the other dot points before. The whole reason I made that video in the first place, and that is dot point, now she's having another book published capitalizing on her legitimately stalking someone. The book she's having published it's a collection of 6 essays, including the one that she wrote about her stalking someone, which was called Catfish. That's something I got passionately angry about in my last video because it has in no way was anything that happened in this whole situation catfishing, and that's the title of the essay, and that's something that was repeatedly said to kind of minimize the stalking itself. I better not get into that. Anyway, the BuzzFeed article in question is called, "Is YA author Kathleen Hale a crazy stalker?"
Yes! 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 Yeah!
The article is written by Sashi Cool, who has had her own, controversies in the past. I can't say I've had a sweet spot for her, but this isn't about her. And to give credit where credit's due, it's actually a pretty well-written article. She pushes on a lot of the questions that people would have for Kathleen Hale. Kathleen Hale, that a lot of other interviewers would probably have shied away from due to how confrontational and awkward it is. But the writer of this article also happens to kind of build on some of Kathleen's defenses for herself that I think are just completely ridiculous. But we'll get to that. So it's a really, really long article. To be honest, it probably could have been a lot shorter, but obviously the writer wanted to make sure everyone knows the full story beforehand. So I'm going to be cutting past all of the, explainer of what Kathleen did, because like I said, there's a whole video on that. And of course, if you want to read this article for yourself, if you want to read it in context, I swear if one person says I'm taking stuff out of context, I'm going to bitch slap my mother, and my mum's real sweet, so that's going to be on you. Due to physical limitations and me not wanting this video to run as long as Avengers Endgame, I'm going to have to be pulling out specific parts that I think are highlights. There's a particular quote by Kathleen Hale that's pointed out in this article on the topic of this book reviewer who left her a negative review on Goodreads had been using an anonymous alias, which a lot of people on the internet do. And the quote by Kathleen is, "If anonymity is important because it offers protection, then who are we protecting?" People were really taken aback by my essay because I was exploring the ways in which face-to-face interaction, non-anonymous interaction of any kind in modern society has become increasingly and inherently confrontational or aggressive. I think this quote almost perfectly sums up Kathleen's frame of mind on that whole situation that happened. And keep in mind, this is a fresh quote as well, so this is how she still feels about everything that she did. And all I would have to say to that is, why the do you think people want to be anonymous? Because assholes like Kathleen Hale think they have the authority or the right to track down your private information and physically come to your home, to the place that you live, for a book review. I wonder why people want anonymity as protection, Kathleen. I wonder why. Or maybe people want anonymity because they don't want their heads busted open with a bottle, which is another video I've done on another book review stalker, which is admittedly 100 times worse, but I think still perfectly illustrates why people would want to be anonymous and have the protection of being anonymous online. And regardless of how the author feels about that, people have that right. That's not something that you get to explore by actually physically tracking people down. That's just, it's like, I feel like I'm taking crazy pills! Am I the only one who feels that this is inarguably immoral? One of my main issues with this article is just, it has this kind of weird, blasé, like, attitude towards, tracking down someone who wishes to remain anonymous and going to the place that they live and harassing them while they're at work on the phone by pretending to be someone else. Back to the article. So during discussing with Kathleen the idea of Kathleen's editors advising her against putting out the catfish article, Kathleen says something kind of weird, and I'm not sure exactly what her point is. I'll tell you what I feel like she's trying to say, but obviously I can't say 100% that's what it was, but it's just kind of weird. But she says, "It was a surprise to me that someone like me, I'm really a nobody knows who I am. When I wrote that article, I was making $12,000 a year on my writing before taxes. The fact that an article I had written for The Guardian generated 5 years of news, it's pretty insane." Do you think she's it feels like she's trying to flex here. I mean, it has a little bit of a self-deprecating tone, but that feels like a flex. And first of all, it didn't generate 5 years of news. That's just not true. It was news for quite a while, and people might have referenced it in future when similar situations happened. But the only reason it became news again in a big way is because you decided to, well, I say you, but I mean Kathleen. I mean, I doubt she's watching this, but if she is, you. The reason it became news again in a big way is because Kathleen is now publishing another book that capitalizes on it. That's why it's news again. It's not because it was so remarkable or anything like that. It's just, it wasn't news for 5 years. That's all I'm saying. There's also a quote here from the writer of the article itself that feels completely unnecessary, and to be honest, I just think is objectively false. "The response to Hale's piece was disproportionate in a way that male writers rarely experience." Why in the hell would you make this a gendered issue? I felt there was a streak of misogyny in some of the negative responses. I challenge you to find one person who was outraged by this Kathleen Hale situation that would promote or encourage the same behavior in a male. It's just, there is no need for this to be a gendered issue. That is obviously something that Kathleen is trying to use as a defense, as a wall between her and any of the criticism about, I don't know, stalking someone. The fact the writer of the article decided to encourage that is mind-boggling. Here's the thing. The whole, situation around Kathleen Hale, it has exploded, and it feels like it's even a bigger deal than the male guy who tracks a teenager down and bottled her, even though it's not. I'm pretty sure that made, national news outside of book circles. But the reason the Kathleen Hale situation is such a huge thing still within the book community is because of Kathleen's response to this controversy. This whole situation has mutated from just being that Kathleen did something shitty to having this author who continuously and still refuses all responsibility for what she did and likes to blame other things for why it's such a big deal, like misogyny. The reason people are still pissed off is because Kathleen Hale still feels that she hasn't really done anything wrong. It's not because she has a vajayjay. So there's also a bit in the article that I don't really want to joke about because it is horrible, but I'm not even going to show it just because of the potential for it to cause some kind of negative trigger in people. But it's her talking about how people were messaging her, telling her to kill herself, people messaging her pictures of her mum's home address, basically to try and say, look, we can dox you too. And then she goes on to say that she was self-harming. And look, if that's true, that's horrible, okay? I wouldn't wish that on anyone. And if that's a situation that Kathleen's still in, I would really hope that she's seeking help. And I mean professional help, not just from the yes people that she keeps around her telling her that she hasn't done anything wrong. I mean from a professional. And at no point in time is telling someone to kill themselves or tracking down their family members' addresses appropriate. If you're someone who has done that, you're a piece of shit. Simple as that. Don't be a fucking scumbag. You don't need to be a scumbag to scumbags. It's just don't sink to their level. But look, all that aside, I still don't hold a lot of sympathy or any sympathy at all for Kathleen, and that's just the fact of the matter. And if you don't understand why already, then, well, let me get to that. There's already some reviews out for her new book, the Kathleen Hale is a Crazy Stalker book, that are kind of interesting. They're a bit fascinating. So one of them says, the essays don't work as well together thematically as she perhaps hopes they do. And from what I understand, the essays are meant to kind of contrast her stalking someone and her being the victim, I guess. So there's one called Catfish, and then there's one called Prey, which is about her actually being sexually assaulted, which is obviously horrible. But contrasting you doing something horrible with something else, of someone else doing something horrible to you, feels, at least to me, feels kind of morally questionable. And this next quote from a Maris Kriesman is perhaps my favorite line in the entire article. And it's because it sums up so perfectly exactly what is wrong with Kathleen's approach to the whole situation. And that is, radical honesty and self-deprecation don't make up for a startling lack of empathy. Thank you! And that is exactly right. Talking about yourself in a negative way and saying how painting yourself as a victim in the aftermath of you doing something incredibly is not an apology. Kathleen's never given an apology or accepted responsibility for what she did, and to be honest, I don't think she intends to. And yet despite that, she somehow feels like she's entitled to being forgiven because of how self-deprecating she is in her essays, which I obviously haven't read, but I'm not reviewing her essays. I'm providing commentary on the fact that she has decided to profit off of doing something horrible. So the article talks a bit more about all of the negative responses online to Kathleen's new book, all of the people saying they're not going to read it and they can't believe a publisher is, publishing it. I feel like saying cancel culture just in general is a pretty different thing, because I like to consider myself pretty anti-cancel culture. I like the idea of letting people say stupid shit or bad things so that people have the opportunity to call them out for it. But the whole Kathleen situation just feels like a bit of a different situation there. I'm not sure I would go so far as to saying to the publishers, you should not be publishing this book, but I think ethically and morally, they probably shouldn't. Okay, but here's the bit I was referring to when I started the video, when I said I wasn't going to even make a video until I read this point that they keep trying to push, or Kathleen keeps trying to push, and the writer of the article tends to encourage in the narrative of the article itself. But it says, I'm not allowed to exist on Goodreads, and to be clear, just so I'm not quoted out of context, I don't mean that literally, Hale said. I mean the reaction to this article that I wrote, people find it so terrifying that I almost knocked on someone's door using publicly available information that they think I shouldn't be allowed to have a job or work. And I think that says a lot about where we are as a culture. Wow. I have so many thoughts, so many memes that would fit well in here. That's the beauty of editing. I guess I can just edit a few of them in. I think my favorite of which would be maybe the Principal Skinner meme, the one where he's like, no, it is the children who are wrong. Maybe it was morally questionable for me to track down someone who wanted to remain anonymous, by gathering their personal information through all of my resources and connections, and despite the fact that address might have been publicly available, me knowing full well that that person didn't want me to confront them or was not comfortable with me confronting them. Maybe I should have known by the fact they were crying on the phone when I continued to harass them at their place of work that I was taking this way too far and I was doing the wrong thing. No, it's the book community who are wrong. Oh man, just another stalker victim to cancel culture. That sucks. I am willing to concede that Twitter, especially book Twitter, is very quick and very explosive in regards to canceling people for things that personally a lot of the time are quite arbitrary. Stalking and harassing someone does not fall into that category. No one's saying that Kathleen doesn't have the right to a job or work. I think everyone just agrees collectively that maybe that job, maybe that work shouldn't be in something that people would generally want to provide creative criticism on, because obviously Kathleen can't handle criticism to a dangerous degree. She can't handle criticism to a point where the people providing criticism are not safe. And a small part of that whole bit of dialogue I just read out is the one part that pissed me off the most, and it's that she's trying to downplay everything she did. She's trying to basically say, oh, they were never in any danger. People find it so terrifying that I almost knocked on someone's door. No! My God, no, that's not it. That is such an unfair bullshit cop-out comparison. That's not it. That's like someone kidnapping a child. Obviously, this metaphor is going to be a bit of an exaggeration, but the principle remains the same, so just bear with me. It's like someone kidnapping a child, intending to take them on a flight out of the country, and then they get to the airport, and they're like, nah. So then they return the child, and then people get pissed off about it, and they're like, wow, people find it so terrifying that I nearly bought a plane ticket. How f***ing deluded can you be to think that you can compress finding someone's private information and physically visiting them and harassing them down to almost knocking on a door? It's just stupid. It's the stupidest f***ing thing I've ever read. Yes, in this situation, Kathleen, you did not strangle someone, you did not murder someone, whatever. But people that provide reviews or criticism or feedback on creative things like books and art, etc., they shouldn't have to feel like there is any potential for bad things to happen, like, I don't know, having your head busted open by a crazy guy with a bottle, because there was always the potential there. What if you had wanted to bring physical harm to this person, especially someone who made the choice to be anonymous online, I'm guessing for that exact reason. So a lot more of the article kind of plays into Goodreads bullies, and there are a lot of bullies on Goodreads that provide harsh reviews. This is kind of a whole segment of conversation I had in the first Kathleen Hale video, but I think discussing that at length while you're writing about an interview with Kathleen Hale is a poor choice, because it almost seems like it's trying to provide some kind of defense for Kathleen by saying like, well, what she did sucked, but they're bullies. Someone's got to teach them a lesson. I just don't think it's entirely appropriate. There's another whole part of the article where they discuss profiting from the stalking, which I liked that was written about. I'm glad that was included in the article. And it's something that the writer of the article seems to think is morally questionable as well, at least partly. Did you think enough time had passed that people have forgotten, that they think of it now as a joke, as something we can all laugh about? I asked Hale more than once why she would republish this particular essay, but my questions were mostly brushed off, beyond the fact that it was Grove's suggestion to publish a collection of Hale's essays. Later on in the article, she says that she could have published it through HarperCollins if she'd wanted to. Now, I can't say she's lying because I don't want to get sued. But number one, I'm not sure HarperCollins would be willing to attach themselves to that kind of controversy again, especially a book that is directly capitalizing on that controversy. I think they would know what a bad business decision that would be. But then again, Kathleen does have like a mother-in-law that works at HarperCollins or something, so maybe. Actually, while I'm on that topic, I should probably say as well, in the article it mentions that she is doing fine for herself because she's a writer for shows on Netflix, Hulu, HBO, and even Marvel. Now, I can't say she's lying, but I scoured the entire internet. I scoured every corner of the internet I could get to. I have found absolutely no record anywhere of Kathleen being credited for being a writer with any of those networks. I don't know, maybe she is, but all I'm saying is there's no record of it whatsoever, so do with that information what you will. If you know something I don't, if you manage to find some information on that, feel free to leave it in a comment below. They also discuss the title of Kathleen's new book, Kathleen Hale is a Crazy Stalker, which in my opinion was done entirely just to garner publicity off of what Kathleen is most well known for, and then to play it off like a crazy quirk because it's owning that in a self-deprecating way. But like that brilliant quote said before, being self-deprecating means nothing when you show a lack of empathy. So on the topic of the title, Kathleen says, there's nothing else to call it.
I mean, it's just bull.
So I've noticed also in the article that Kathleen still thinks of the person who gave her the initial bad book review as a troll, although I've read that review. And I mean, it was kind of harsh, sure, but it wasn't trolling. I don't think Kathleen really understands what trolling is. The person just didn't like the book, and I guess they just couldn't find a more polite way of saying that in a book review, but nothing they did was any attempt to, troll Kathleen Hale. In fact, I doubt the person who wrote that book review had any idea that Kathleen would ultimately be reading it. But again, I think using the term troll and catfishing were just fundamentally incorrect, but also just ways to minimize what it is that she did wrong by trying to make the person that she did it to seem much worse than they were. There's so many weird parts of the article too where it just delves a bit too deep into the fact that Kathleen's white and that a lot of book reviewers are white men, and it just feels just weirdly unnecessary, but that's neither here nor there, I guess. One thing I find is interesting as well in the article is that it's touched on that Kathleen has she's made almost no attempt whatsoever to promote the book, and I think the reason for that is that she knows the more the book is promoted, especially by herself, the more backlash she would get. So there's a bit by the writer of the article that I found really interesting as well, and it says, eventually I got her on the phone, but only with her publicist's supervision, a frustrating level of clearance to have to go through in order to speak to an author who is trying to promote a new book. I can't imagine the mindset of a publisher as a business making the decision to get behind an author who has that many gatekeepers in discussing the book itself. It seems insane. But look, here's another example of that thing that I said before makes me the most angry about this whole article, and that's minimizing what Kathleen did. And another way it's done in this article is by comparing Kathleen to people who are obviously much worse. People who had stalked people and then killed them, like that's some kind of fair comparison. But those people also did jail time. Kathleen didn't, so I mean, there's just no need for the comparison there. But anyway, Hale, Britton, and Kuklinski have remarkably little in common. Richard Britton assaulted a teenager. Richard Kuklinski claimed to have killed hundreds of people. Kathleen Hale wrote one bad essay. No, don't minimize it to she wrote one bad essay or she nearly knocked on a door. People aren't angry that she wrote a bad essay. People are angry about the content of the essay. People are angry about what she did and confessed to in the essay, and the fact that she still, at this point in time, has shown absolutely no empathy or remorse for what she did. That's why people are angry. Minimizing it to writing a bad essay and then putting it up against people who have actually killed other people is extremely unfair, and more than anything, it's unfair to the person who was stalked. I asked Hale more than once why she would republish this particular essay. And then, as if it wasn't already done enough, Kathleen's stalking and harassment was one last time for the article minimized to being nothing more than a little mishap, with a bit of a sprinkle of the misogyny defense in there just for good measure. It's easy to liken Hale to the recent spate of cancelled men who pop their heads out to see if people are no longer mad about their misdeeds, but that comparison would be unfair. Hale isn't a sexual abuser, an unrepentant racist, or even a bad writer, but it's clear the book world of this era isn't ready for her return and may never be. Like you literally just said, that would not be a fair comparison. So why did you make the comparison? If we were to compare literally every bad thing that people do to, racists and murderers and rapists, then the standard expectation would be that we are forgiving literally everyone. Oh, what's that, babe? You cheated on me with my brother? Oh, and my best friend as well? And my uncle? Okay, well, I mean, he's not the best looking guy, so I mean, that's a little confusing, but... And my grandfather? I mean, that sucks. I'm feeling a bit heartbroken, but you know, you didn't murder anyone. You're not racist, at least. So, you know what, give it a couple of weeks. We'll be fine. And that whole little bit there, that whole example, is still not as bad as stalking and harassing someone. It's a bit hard to forgive Kathleen if she doesn't apologize. It's pointed out so many times in this article itself that she has no interest in seeking forgiveness or apologizing for what she did. So why the hell are people expected to, like, be cool with her coming back into the book scene? If she doesn't think she did anything wrong, how are people meant to trust that she's not gonna do it again? Oh my god. I'm done. That's the article. Okay, look. Let me summarize my opinion on this. Yay! Personal opinion time! Alright! Woo! Look, I don't think Kathleen is a good person. I think she has absolutely no empathy and no remorse for, like I said before, and I'm gonna keep repeating it because I really want it to stick in people's heads just how bad what she did was. She tracked down the private information, including the living address of someone who wanted to be anonymous online, harassed them at their place of work on the phone by pretending to be someone else to the point where that person cried, and then physically went to their address and described in detail, by the way, in her blog or essay, whatever, what was even in the backseat of their car. Essentially just a massive violation of that person's privacy, and to this point has shown absolutely no remorse. To the best of my knowledge, has not given any kind of apology, and yet expects that she be forgiven, and if she's not, then it's cancel culture. Or it's misogyny, or it's people just being angry that she nearly knocked on a door. Look, I think it's bullshit. I think her whole response to this situation has been bullshit, and to be honest, I think this article is pretty bullshit too. I don't think Kathleen should be encouraged, I don't think any of her defenses should be reinforced, and unless something big or different really happens with this whole situation, I'm dusting my hands clean of it. I'm done. I've said literally everything there is to say about Kathleen Hale and her bullshit in these last two videos. So, did you like this one? Did you like the intensity? Well, hey, you might like some of my other, I feel like I need a name. It's kind of become a series at this point where I do videos on authors who have done shitty things. Just check out the cards I've left above. You can check out my Lenny Sarum one, or if you want to hear a really intense one, look into the Richard Breton one, the one where he literally did almost the exact same thing as Kathleen Hale, but followed through and physically assaulted the person who left him a review. It was intense. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Catch ya.